Welcome, future social studies educators. In this video, we're going to look at the WIDA English Language Development Standards Framework as it applies to language in social studies. In part one, we looked at language that applies to all content areas, including social studies. That was language for social and instructional purposes. Here, I chose not to make a PowerPoint because there's a lot, and it's simpler to go through the website. You can go through the website yourself. In fact, you should. You're going to look this week in the discussion board, at the proficiency level descriptors by grade level of a grade level of your choice, either I'm assuming middle school or high school if you're watching a social studies video. Um, the language for social studies standards is structured in a little bit different grades. It is the traditional middle school grades instead of grades 4 through 12. So actually, it doesn't include grade 5. You are all licensed for grade 5. If you want to look at grade 5, which is peer structure with grade 4, you certainly may. I don't think you'll see much difference there. We're primarily going to look just at the high school language development framework, and that's because what they do is at each level they add to it, and that's what you're going to see in bold when I display the standards in a minute. The information in bold are additions or revisions from the previous grade level. So once or twice I will go back to middle school just to show you what the differences are, but it's the same general ideas, just with more detail. And I hope what you'll see as we go through this is that this is the sort of communication that you want your students to be doing. What you're doing here is you're just making it explicit. Sometimes we just call these literacy standards because they are standards for literacy that are good for all students. You might remember in the language for social and instructional purposes, there were actually 4 components. They were narrate, inform, explain, and argue. But for most of the content areas, there are just 2 components, explain and argue. There is narrate in language arts for obvious reasons. But we are going to explain and argue in social studies. Each of them is interpretive and expressive. Interpretive means you are interpreting language, in other words, either listening or reading. And expressive means you're creating language, either writing or speaking. So let us start here with explain and the interpretive components. So multilingual learners should be able to determine multiple types of sources, points of view in sources, and potential uses of sources for answering compelling and supporting questions about phenomena or events. They should be able to analyze sources for logical relationships among contributing factors, causes, or related concepts, and they should be able to evaluate experts' points of agreement and disagreement based on their consistency with explanation given its purpose. And so notice the bold here. These are things that have changed from the middle school one. So we just go back to middle school for the same one. So determine multiple points of view, analyze sources for logical relationships, evaluate experts' points of agreement. So same 3 ones, but we've added some things. We've added related concepts. We've looked at points of disagreement of experts. So we're adding information. And then to be able to write or speak, learners should be able to introduce and contextualize multiple phenomena or events, establish perspective for communicating intended and unintended outcomes, consequences, or documentation, develop sound reasoning sequences with linear and nonlinear relationships, evidence, and details with significant and pertinent information, acknowledging strengths and weaknesses, and generalize experts' points of agreement and disagreement about multiple complex causes and effects of developments or events. And then under this, and this will be true for all of the expressive areas, there are useful language functions and features that we would expect our students to use. This can be really helpful as you are considering what objectives to write in a lesson plan, for example, or an explanation of what you hope for your students to do. And so I encourage you to take a look more in depth at the language functions that are connected to expressive language in these standards. Our next one is to interpret arguments. So multilingual learners will interpret social studies arguments by identifying topic and purpose, So to argue in favor of or against a position, to present a balanced interpretation, to challenge a perspective. By analyzing relevant information to support and or revise claims with valid and reliable evidence from multiple sources. And by evaluating the credibility, accuracy, and relevancy of a source based on expert perspectives. Then creating one's own work. Multilingual learners will construct social studies arguments that introduce and contextualize the topic, select relevant information to support precise and knowledgeable claims with evidence from multiple sources, establish perspective, and show relationships between claims and counterclaims, differences in perspective, evidence, and reasoning. And again, examples here for each of those things of what we might expect language functions for our learners to work with. So I hope you found this useful. I encourage you to explore the website. If you have any questions, please let me know, and thank you so much for watching.